Most men believe they act out of logic, but their decisions are born from impulses they do not control. They live convinced that they choose their own paths, when in reality they simply follow internal forces they do not understand. This is the invisible machinery that shapes behavior, ambition, and defeat. The strategist observes this without haste. He understands that people reveal more in silence than in speech, more in involuntary gestures than in calculated declarations. He deals not with what they claim to be, but with what their instincts force them to show. That is where the game truly begins. Before any action, any threat, any negotiation, every mind carries predictable fractures. The one who learns to identify them does not manipulate. He merely directs a flow that was already there. The real danger lies in those who still believe they have control over themselves. Machiavelli never believed in human chaos. To him, every person followed predictable paths, patterns as evident as the movement of worn pieces on an old chessboard. The human mind is not a mystery, it is a map. And anyone who sees it clearly understands that very few people have enough depth to hide their own psychological axis. Some seek constant validation, others are governed by fear, while the ambitious reveal their intentions before they even attempt to disguise them. Each type carries a rhythm and cadence that expose future behavior long before a single word is spoken. The validator always approaches with a look that asks for permission. He adjusts his voice according to others' reactions, leans forward, and searches for micro-expressions of approval to determine his next move. The fearful one speaks too quickly, justifies too much, tries to occupy as little space as possible, and shows anxiety when an interaction demands confrontation. These patterns are so stable that, observed with cold precision, they allow you to predict how they will behave under pressure, authority, or uncertainty. Their predictability is the weakness that sustains the strategist's control. The ambitious man, on the other hand, exposes desire before understanding its cost. He looks at power as if observing something he believes he deserves, but does not know how to obtain. His urgency betrays him. The submissive operates through automatic obedience, adjusting posture, lowering his tone, and following veiled orders without question. The emotionally dependent man reveals his neediness even in the way he breathes. He waits for someone to tell him who to be so he can feel that he exists. These archetypes do not appear by chance. They are structures forged by pain, repetition, and necessity. Once these patterns are identified, the strategist does not need to manipulate anyone. He simply guides interactions along the path the other person is already predisposed to follow. Knowing who someone is before they reveal themselves creates advantage without conflict, directs intentions without effort, and anticipates betrayals before they take form. The map has always existed. The mistake lies in believing that people change when they wish to. They only repeat what they are. Every man is governed by a primary impulse. He believes he is in control, yet his mind responds first to instinct and only later to reason. Fear, ego, or desire, one of these axes shapes his posture, his rhythm, and his vulnerability. None of this needs to be spoken. You only need to watch how the body reacts to the environment. Fear compresses space, ego expands it, and desire distorts it. From that point on, every choice becomes predictable, because no primal impulse stays discreet for long. A man driven by fear shows hesitation at the first sign of pressure. His shoulders pull back, his voice loses firmness, and his eyes look for escape before looking for arguments. He negotiates to avoid pain, not to gain advantage, and that difference exposes him completely. He yields to authority, avoids direct confrontation, and chooses the path of least resistance. His behavior is simple to read. Any increase in tension reveals his fragility. And once he reveals himself, he loses the game before the board is even set. Ego, on the other hand, creates an illusion of strength. The man shaped by this impulse occupies space without realizing that his need to be noticed exposes deep insecurity. He talks too much, asserts too much, and competes for attention even when there is no competition. He moves like someone trying to protect an imaginary crown. His weakness is not arrogance, but predictability. Ego always reacts. Always. Touch the identity he tries to protect, and his logic collapses. He becomes manipulable because he becomes emotional. Desire is a quieter, but more dangerous impulse. It distorts priorities, alters judgment, and weakens boundaries. The man driven by desire, whether for status, validation, or conquest, lets his need guide decisions that should be strategic. His attention reveals what he values. His body leans in, his expression softens, his presence fluctuates. And when someone exposes cues without realizing it, they also expose the pathway through which they can be guided. Identifying which instinct governs a person is the key. Whoever understands the root controls the entire structure. Whoever sees the master impulse sees the other man's future before he does. No man shows who he truly is. He shows only the mask he believes is sufficient to survive the judgment of others. The persona is a defensive mechanism, a character built to hide what is missing, what hurts, or what threatens. The strategist examines this mask not to expose someone, but to understand what it is trying to protect. The surface is never the point. It is only the trail that leads to the invisible core. The social mask reveals itself through repeated behavior. The overly friendly, the excessively consistent, the impossibly reliable, each one carries a rigid, rehearsed construction incapable of improvisation. When a posture is too perfect, something is at risk. The hidden wound is precisely what the individual fears seeing exposed. It appears in the slips, a sudden change in tone, irritation that surfaces out of place, silence that lasts longer than it should. The mind tries to maintain control, but pain always leaves visible cracks. The second layer is the original wound, the emotional point that shaped how a person relates to power, affection, and authority. This wound determines what they accept, what they reject, and what they fear. Men who were underestimated carry the need to prove their worth. Men who were betrayed develop excessive vigilance. Men who were controlled distrust any form of guidance. The origin does not matter. The resulting behavior is mathematical. Every wound creates a pattern, and every pattern reveals what a person tries to hide. The third layer is the most revealing. Behavior under pressure. This is where the persona breaks and the wound bleeds. When someone loses time, resources, emotional control, or social position, their structure becomes exposed. The timid become aggressive, the confident hesitate, the rational reveal fear. Pressure removes the mask because it demands energy, and the mind cannot sustain two battles at once. The strategist does not create this pressure. He simply waits for the moment when it appears. Decoding these three layers is seeing the complete psychological architecture of someone. The mask shows who they want to be, the wound shows who they once were, and the reaction under tension shows who they are now. Whoever understands this does not manipulate people. He manipulates structures. Every mind has a point where the illusion of control dissolves. It is not a moral weakness but a psychological structure. Each person carries an emotional fracture they try to hide through routine, speech, or an appearance of strength. This breaking point does not appear immediately. It reveals itself when the mind is exposed to what it fears most: loss, rejection, humiliation, invisibility, or failure. The strategist does not try to trigger this moment, only to understand it. Whoever knows someone's limit holds the key to their predictability. The breaking point usually shows itself first in subtle details. A sudden shift in the eyes when a sensitive topic is mentioned. The stiffness in posture when facing indirect criticism. The change in breathing when social position is threatened. These micro-reactions are traces of the instinct trying to protect the inner territory. They signal something unresolved, something that reorganizes behavior even against the person's will. Reading these reactions means recognizing where someone stops thinking and starts reacting. Hidden needs are even more revealing. Some men require validation to feel they exist. Deny it, and they lose stability. Others depend on control and become anxious when confronted with uncertainty. Some guard old insecurities with verbal aggression or rehearsed arrogance. The mind tries to mask these vulnerabilities through extreme behavior, but exaggeration always exposes what was meant to stay concealed. The greater the defense, the greater the fear it protects. Repressed ambitions create another kind of rupture. Men who crave power but refuse to admit it. Men who want respect but don't know how to generate it. Men who dream of status but fear exposure. When an opportunity touches that hidden desire, they break their own composure, becoming impulsive, anxious, predictable. Once activated, desire reorganizes priorities and distorts judgment. Rupture is not an explosion. It is a loss of direction. Identifying the breaking point is not about destroying someone, but about understanding the structure that moves them. Manipulation is simply the ability to predict how a mind reacts when confronted with what it tries to deny. The one who sees this limit does not dominate through force but through precise reading of what the other cannot control. True influence doesn't come from persuasion. It comes from silent direction. Ordinary men try to convince by speaking too much. The strategist guides by suggesting very little. When you understand someone's internal structure, there is no need to impose ideas. You place them along the natural path of that person's mind. Effective suggestion never sounds like an order or advice. It sounds like a thought the person believes is their own. That is why this power goes unnoticed. It acts before the other person realizes there was movement. Indirect suggestion works when you offer fragments instead of arguments. Rather than stating an opinion, you drop a neutral, calculated observation that activates the other person's dominant impulse. Their mind completes the rest. It connects, interprets, fills the gaps, and defends the idea as if it originated there. The strategist doesn't rush to explain. He leaves openings for the other person to see themselves reflected. Silence, when used precisely, forces the mind to fill the empty space with its own fears and desires. Selective reinforcement is another discreet weapon. Instead of direct praise, you acknowledge only the behaviors you want to encourage. There is no need for continuous validation, only controlled signals indicating which direction creates social advantage. People follow what they perceive as strategic approval, not emotional approval. They don't obey force, they obey benefit. Shaping behavior doesn't require imposition, only subtle adjustments of reward. Calculated emotional mirroring isn't imitation. It is strategic synchrony. You match the other person's rhythm to create familiarity without losing yourself in it. This alignment generates a sense of understanding, and wherever there is perceived understanding, influence becomes easier. The ordinary man tries to appear similar. The strategist appears compatible enough to avoid resistance. A mind that does not resist absorbs. The art of influence is not manipulating what someone thinks, but guiding the path their thoughts take. When the final decision feels like it belonged to them, the control belongs to you. The most efficient power is the one no one notices, only senses. The ego is the most fragile armor a human carries. It appears solid, yet it rests on expectations, distorted memories, and a constant need for validation. That is why it becomes the most efficient access point for guiding behavior. The strategist does not attack the ego. He observes it, measures its reach, and identifies where it expands too far. Excess always exposes insecurity, and where insecurity exists, control is possible. Inflating the right ego creates a corridor of obedience without the person noticing. When you acknowledge a trait the individual already believes he possesses, he opens space for your influence. It is not praise, it is calculated confirmation. He feels relief, not admiration, and relief creates silent dependence. From that point on, any direction you give appears natural, almost inevitable. The ego seeks to preserve its sense of greatness and follows anyone who sustains it with precision. Emptying the wrong ego is a subtler technique. It is not about humiliation, but about removing the stage the person stands on. A long pause in the face of arrogance, a neutral expression against an attempt to impress, a short response when he seeks recognition. These actions disrupt the mental rhythm of someone who relies on constant validation. The absence of impact generates unease, and unease makes the individual more malleable, more attentive to your next move. Creating strategic emotional dependence is the next step. When you alternate reinforcement and silence, confirmation and distance, the other person begins to seek predictability. In that process, he tries to decipher your logic, and it is precisely that effort that traps him. The ego hates uncertainty, which is why it gravitates toward whoever can modulate it. You do not manipulate directly. You control the frequency with which he feels valued or ignored. Guiding someone through the ego does not require explicit force. It requires observation, calculation, and rhythm. The man who needs admiration will always follow the one who offers, in measured doses, the illusion of greatness. His vanity builds its own collar. The strategist merely holds the end of it. Power that displays itself is unstable power. Real control operates without noise, without confrontation, without the need to assert authority. When you guide someone without their awareness, you create a force that cannot be contested because it doesn't appear to come from you. The human mind accepts most easily what it believes it chose. The strategist understands this. He does not push. He simply adjusts the environment until the other person's decision aligns with the outcome he intends. Guiding choices begins with anticipation. When you understand patterns, impulses, and breaking points, You know exactly which options the other mind is prepared to accept. You don't present random alternatives. You present only the ones that already feel natural to them. The common mistake is trying to persuade. The correct strategy is making the desired path the most comfortable, logical, and inevitable. People follow because they see coherence, not command. Explicit manipulation creates resistance. Silent manipulation creates adaptation. When you shape conversations, silences, and contexts to favor a specific direction, the other person begins moving as if it were their own initiative. A shift in tone at the right moment, a neutral question placed with precision, a gesture of agreement that appears spontaneous. These minimal details reorganize internal thoughts without the individual noticing the external influence. Another pillar of invisible control is allowing the other person to feel victorious. Even when you guide their decision, you leave room for their ego to remain intact. This preservation reduces future resistance and creates the sense of partnership rather than domination. The strategist does not jung protagonism, he yields, knowing the concession is part of the structure that controls the flow. Those who believe they have won do not fight the one who allowed them to win. The final principle is simple. Mastering the environment is more efficient than mastering the person. When the setting favors your strategy, others move naturally in the direction you want. No confrontation, no imposition, no visible signs of control. The purest power is the one that no one sees, only obeys. The experienced manipulator never attacks directly. He moves closer, measures, tests. He watches how you react to small concessions, how far your emotional limits stretch, and how quickly you feel the need to justify yourself. Nothing in his behavior is accidental. Every gesture is designed to map your vulnerability before exploiting it. Defense doesn't begin by rejecting the manipulator, but by recognizing the invisible pattern. Every attempt at control starts with a silent assessment of your stability. The first sign is the gradual erosion of your emotional autonomy. Manipulators make you doubt your own perceptions, question your clarity, and adjust your behavior to avoid tension. They offer calculated validation, then withdraw it, creating psychological dependency. It's in this back and forth that most people lose control. They chase coherence where it will never exist and try to please someone who operates through chaos. The defense lies in keeping your inner axis intact, regardless of external pressure. The second sign is the strategic use of vulnerability. Manipulators pretend to be fragile, craft narratives of suffering, and present themselves as misunderstood. This isn't a plea for empathy. It's a way to gain access. When someone tries to accelerate emotional intimacy, push for confessions, or demand early loyalty, it isn't connection. It's mapping. The correct response is calculated distance. Too much proximity gives too much information. The third sign is the manipulation of social rhythm. Manipulators control timing, silence, and urgency. They create situations where you feel forced to answer quickly, decide quickly, surrender quickly. Speed is their weapon. Whenever someone tries to rush your choice, slow down. The pause dismantles strategies built on impulsivity. The manipulator depends on your reaction. Remove the reaction, and you remove his power. Finally, observe the effect the person has on you. If their presence brings confusion, constant tension, self-censorship, or a sense of emotional debt, you're not facing someone strong. You're facing someone calculated. Defense doesn't require confrontation. It requires clarity and boundaries. You don't drive manipulators away. You eliminate the environment they operate in. Where there is no access, there is no control. Where there is no reaction, there is no game. As you move through each layer of the human mind, you realize that control was never in the hands of others. It has always been in your ability to see. The ordinary man tries to manipulate first and understand later. The strategist does the opposite. He watches until the other person's truth reveals itself on its own. Power is born in that analytical silence, not in gestures, not in words, not in displays of force, but in the cold awareness of what truly drives the people around you. In the end, the question is not about them, it is about you. Every pattern identified, every mask decoded, every impulse understood becomes a mirror. You recognize in others what you have learned to see in yourself. If you detected fear, it lives in you. If you noticed ego, it guides you more than you admit. If you sensed desire, it still governs decisions you insist on calling choices. Your reading of the world always begins inside your own shadow. Denying that is choosing to remain vulnerable. Real power does not lie in controlling people. It lies in not being controlled by your own emotional architecture. When you understand your triggers, your breaking points, your illusions of greatness, and your hidden need for validation, nothing the world does can destabilize you. The manipulator loses access. The dominant loses advantage. The environment stops dictating your behavior. This internal command was, for Machiavelli, the highest form of sovereignty. No one can lead what already leads itself. The conclusion offers no triumph, only direction. You can use this knowledge to understand people or to shape them. You can become someone who reads the game or someone who recreates it. But there is a line that separates the manipulator from the sovereign. The manipulator acts from deficiency. The sovereign acts from awareness. The silent choice you make now will define who you become in the presence of power and chaos. And remember, the world does not respect the one who seeks to be understood. It respects the one who becomes impossible to manipulate.